Marvel's Echo was a strong female character, but what you weren't expecting is that she is also an indigenous American. But that's just what the show writers expected you to not expect, in order to then subvert your expectations even further by giving her a prosthetic leg.
Are you being sarcastic?
But just when there's seemingly nothing feasible left to not expect, these Marvel writers turned those expectations on their head by also making her deaf.
Is he having a laugh? Are you having a laugh?
Echo, as seen in this trailer, titled Time for a Queen, is an upcoming show engorged with empowering inclusivity. They tried to shit-can the project, and in the end, they are dumping all of the episodes at once in the entertainment graveyard of January, with all the irked and frustrated self-consciousness of someone so desperate to be rid of an old mattress that they drag it out of their van at nighttime and discard it by the huge industrial bins around the side of a supermarket. The show writers have completely changed the look and the powers from the comic book character. In the comic book, she could echo anybody's movements, anybody's fighting style, but the director of this series said those powers were not ideal. So in this on-screen iteration, she can summon the powers of her ancestors. They want to position her as an anti-hero, but because of the empowering intersectional representation, it is inherently impossible for her to actually be bad. So any even vague anti-hero notions aren't believable, so suspension of disbelief is redundant, so there's hardly any dramatic tension, ergo the show will be lame as shit. You remember when Amazon released The Lord of the Rings of Power, and things didn't seem to be progressing smoothly, and the rollout was dogged by ominous poor test screenings and audience skepticism, and so they flung together a group of so-called superfans to enter into the benignly chirpy nonsense that constitutes Gen Z banter and extol the upcoming disaster of a show. Remember how feeble and flaky they looked, and dressed, and acted, and sounded, and interacted, and pontificated? A cluster of cringe-inducing, lightweight douchebag identity junkies whose every word was seemingly finely calibrated to have the effect of millions of people on a global live stream, simultaneously dragging their fingernails down a chalkboard in high-resolution audio.
Wow, Mr. Sarcasm, yeah.
Well, those erstwhile superfans, had they seen the following clip of Echo superfans, would probably have remarked to themselves, man, these guys are total pussies compared to us. Let's consider what remains of the MCU fanbase. A pair of possibly sapphic cosmopolitan Parisian ladies, one like a pseudo-Marlene Dietrich, in suspenders and a tie, the two of them presumably going back to their apartment and using baguettes as substitute strap-ons during hair-swirling gyrations. An identity junkie wearing a Paddington bear crossed with Jodie Whittaker Doctor Who-style ensemble, raving about the multifaceted representation on screen. Another possibly lesbianizing, lesbotic, and lesbicious scissor-sister couple, one with her Nan's hat, Heath Ledger's Joker hair, and an Oxfam clothing aesthetic, and her companion, a squat little gothic Count Wankula, fanfiction-writing creature of the shadows. A woman dressed like Red Riding Hood. A hyped-up bloke who, as yet, and will possibly never, experience the routine morning chore of having to shave. And last, and without question least, this guy. Fashion victim tragic Legolas wearing a silver chain to hide the rash marks left from his more frequently worn BDSM collar and leash. A top that seems like a nightmarish blend of Star Trek the motion picture officer uniform, with unaccountably puffy sleeves like a small child wearing an adult-sized baseball jacket. There has been a wide array of deaf and hearing-impaired stories on screen, depicted with humanity, depth, empathy, and characterized through compelling performances. Coda was the first motion picture starring a predominantly deaf cast in leading roles to win Best Picture. In Sound of Metal, itinerant punk metal drummer Ruben, played by Riz Ahmed, begins to experience intermittent hearing loss. When a doctor tells him his condition will worsen, he thinks his career and life is over. It's a poignant and intimate story. The Last of Us featured a 2-episode arc in which a loyal older brother desperately tries to keep himself and his younger, deaf brother alive. Though all of these works featured deaf actors, or actors depicting deaf characters, it wasn't inherently about promotion, or visibility, or empowerment. Those would inevitably be welcome effects, but only through the development in each instance of a brilliant premise, characters confronted with relatable or daunting circumstances, and insecurities, weaknesses, and pathos allowed to stir within or even drive the stories. Even stories with protagonists who are impaired or have certain conditions still work well within the same contours of the hero's journey. In fact, they could be argued to work particularly well in that structure, beginning naive, callow, in need of guidance, having to suffer through mistakes and confront flaws, before persevering and succeeding as a fully realized character. Echo, in the modern way of wanting to be empowering, takes the shorter, less compelling, and indulgent approach of establishing a so-called dark and gritty aesthetic, and having our heroine be a stoic, Mary Sue, badass, avenging angel. A disruptive, morally ambiguous figure who subdues her humanity, femininity, and winnows her relationships down to practically nothing, in a form of characterization that prevents her being a powerhouse role model, because the effort to make her such is too obvious and too overwrought. She is a lame amalgam of things the writers think it would be cool for a character to be, a walking checkbox of identity tropes, who we don't especially care about overcoming her limitations, because her limitations are clumsily morphed into strengths, and she is so evidently overpowered in the name of empowerment that we never even allow the possibility of her being mastered by opponents. We do, however, drearily presume her being compromised by generic meanies saying generically mean stuff about her, and these asshole ancillaries getting their comeuppance and being dispatched in empowering fashion. But who cares, because this character is so imbued with identity that she, ironically, ceases to really have an identity. That's an irony for you and I to appreciate, dear viewer, because the people who write this stuff have become so enthralled to their ideas and unable to resist the opportunities for explicit progressive expression. They see such pushback or eye-rolling at their product, their content, as mean-spirited and reactionary. They tend to clam up a little, however, when the ratings come in. And at this point, with a product like this, I think we have a fair idea what those ratings are going to look like.